From the beginning of the Bible, we have the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, and finally, Ruth. And that's where we start today. Now, as I said in the promo of this series, I believe that the book of Ruth was written so that the authors could portray a message of social inclusion, specifically the inclusion of foreigners into the people of God. Now, this series is entitled Ruth, Foreigner and Mother of Salvation. And today we're going to focus on the foreigner aspect of Ruth's identity. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Let's go. Now, one fact that may very well be common sense to you is that the books of the Bible were written over a period of hundreds of years, and as the people progressed in their relationship with God, their laws progressed as well and changed over time. If we look at Deuteronomy chapter 23, we see that in the first couple verses, the laws, the Levitical laws, meaning that they applied to the priests, have been expanded, and they apply to all of the people of Israel now. Perhaps this amendment of the laws shows that God valued all of the people of the community as holy, and not just the priests. Perhaps they had progressed in their relationships. And we see this amendment continue as we look throughout the rest of Deuteronomy chapter 23. And so as we look at verses 3 and 4, it specifically says that Ammonites and Moabites shall not be included into the assembly of the Lord, because when you were leaving Egypt, they didn't come out to give you food. Let's fast forward a few books and a couple hundred years to the book of Ruth. Now, it says that at this time there was a famine in the land that Israel inhabited, and the family that lived in Bethlehem experiences famine. Now, in my Bible, in my annotated Bible, it says that this is pretty ironic that there was a famine in Bethlehem, because in Hebrew, Bet-Lechem means house of bread. So it's pretty funny that there's a famine in the house of bread. But I think that it's even more ironic that this family from Bethlehem moves to, where do you want to guess? Moab, to go find food. And I think that's ironic because we see that the Moabites didn't provide the Israelites with food. Now, that family that we talked about, that moved from Bethlehem to Moab, that was Elimelech and Naomi, and they had 2 sons. And so they moved to the land of the Moabites, and their sons, guess what? They got married to Moabite women, to Orpah and Ruth. Now, sadly, as the story goes, all of the men of the family died, and so the women had no one there. Now, I think it's worth noting here that this story focuses on female protagonists, just like later on the birth of Jesus would also have a female protagonist. Now, contrary to popular belief, I believe that this shows that the Bible and God necessarily care about women and value them and their agency. And we'll talk about that later on in this series as well. But for now, back to the story of Ruth. Now, Orpah goes back to her family, while Ruth remains with Naomi. And at the end of this chapter, we see that the Bible says Ruth and Naomi returned back to Bethlehem with Ruth the Moabite at the end of the barley harvest. And now there's 2 things here that I think are noteworthy. Number 1, it keeps referring to Ruth not as just the daughter-in-law of Naomi, but as the Moabite. Now, perhaps this repetition of Ruth's status as a Moabite is specifically employed by the authors to show us that Ruth is this person that was originally rejected in Deuteronomy. And so they're setting us up to say what's going to happen when now she's coming back to the assembly of God, to the people of God. And 2, that Ruth and Naomi are coming back at the barley harvest. And so now Ruth, a foreigner and a Moabite, will be fed by the people of God. Now, already we've seen through the marriage of Israelite men to Moabite women that the laws of the Bible have amended themselves, or at least have loopholes in favor of inclusion. Worldwide, there are over 65.6 million people who have been forcibly displaced. That's over the size of the population of the entire United Kingdom, and it's the size of Texas and California combined. Now, though Ruth may not have been a refugee, she was displaced from her homeland. And so as we go throughout this story, we're going to continue to look at the relationship that Israel has with Ruth as a foreigner. And so we're going to challenge ourselves as the people of God today. How are we interacting with our global neighbors and including them into the people of God and protecting them as equally created people in the image of God? This series is going to challenge us, each of us, to take responsibility to love our global neighbors. And so we each have to challenge our respective governments. Just like the Israelites amended their laws, we have to amend ours in favor of inclusion. Now, I believe that together, when we do this, when we live like the people of God, we will transform the world through love.